8 to 10 a.m. and you're listening to...
Still to come, we'll chat to Mushfiqa Botha, who's a consumer expert, but not just about that. She reflected on the Ramadan Mubarak greeting given to her on air by Dan Moyane on ENC a few days ago, and I thought it was an interesting take on that. So we'll chat to her about that in the feature, which called My First Ramadan. We chat to Khadija Albertus. In fact, she's celebrating or observing, in this case, her very first Ramadan. So we'll talk to her in a few minutes' time. But champion spotting is what we do right now. So you may know Champion South Africa is a project that I head up. We have a goal to turn South Africa into a champion nation. That means identifying champions in the community and building champions that will build the champion nation. Part of that, my role is to try and spot these champions. Well, who are they? So we thought what Rehana Moosajee does is quite fascinating. She's the Barefoot Facilitator. That's what she titles herself at. But whether that fits in with exactly the work that she's done around Slovo Park, that informal settlement adjacent to Crosby, is up for debate. So let's find out more about it. Rehana, appreciate your time. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Ashraf. Shukran for inviting me onto your show.
And thank you. What's it? Day 8 of Ramadan. I trust it's going well for you so far, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. I think we should have another discussion about just balancing when people work often outside of typical Muslim spaces. The balancing act during Ramadan, I think is incredibly taxing. But another conversation for another time. Thank you. Right. Let's talk about Slovo Park, because we're speaking to you because of your role that you've played, yes, with other allies, but specifically that you've driven to uplift a community that in many ways would probably, I'm not saying literally, would probably be closest to emulating the type of sunnah that we often talk about in terms of uplifting communities. So tell me about that.
So Ashraf, let me say I've done very little, actually. That the community I've been able to work with have been living there for probably about 30 years now. The informal settlement, there are so many informal settlements called Slovo Park. There's another one right across from Aldo's in Johannesburg. But this particular one is it's located between Crosby and Coronationville. Been there for about 30 years. Many years ago, had the opportunity to work alongside then Councillor Fadil Musa in that area, and then had kind of stepped away and gotten involved in my own stuff. And I think pretty much during COVID, had a gardener who was living there, and through him initiated a couple of projects, sending some bars of soap over just when COVID was announced, some literature in South African languages to explain what COVID was. And that kind of started a deeper relationship with a couple of young people in that community. And then it's pretty much been organic, Ashraf, the number of people who have stepped in to help. So someone like Sunny Morgan from Analogy, who has donated solar to a container that historically was placed there by the Johannesburg Institute of Social Services. We now have a solar-powered digital skills hub in the heart of an informal settlement. We have created, together with the community, with some support from South African Cities Network, a place called Slovo Space right outside that container, attempting to create a space of harmony, peace for young people in an area where the only congregational spaces are taverns and shebeens. And it's been fascinating. And in fact, Ashraf, this weekend, the community of Slovo Park and some of the young people that we're working with have linked up with another group who are based at Drill Hall, certainly champions that I think you should be talking to as well, who call themselves Exotically Divine Pulse. And this week they're doing something called African Cause Meal, where Exotically Divine Pulse is going to reintroduce traditional African food into the community, and the community will be having a communal meal together. So I've had very little to do, actually, Ashraf, except for connecting the community of Slovo Park to a range of people who have very generously stepped in, but I think importantly that the initiatives are being driven by members of the community themselves rather than being conceptualized or being driven by those of us who live outside of that community.
Well, I mean, you raise a couple of points which I just want to pick up on. I mean, one is, of course, I've seen it because I've been invited by you, so I have a direct sense, if not an everyday sense, of what it looks like. Number one. Number two, I had a chat a few days ago with someone on the show here. In fact, speaking about when it comes to support, say during Ramadan, how much of it must contribute towards hamper support, which is important, and I need to make sure that hamper doesn't sound like hampering support as in harming support. It sounds very, very similar, but the other is actually support in terms of investing in institutional uplifting of society and communities, right? And therefore I think your point is valid. So maybe you say you haven't done much, but connecting and tapping on your social network in many ways is doing a real big deal in terms of effort, right? The other part that you've made, that it's not simply people giving out handouts, but and I've seen certainly what Sunny and company have done. There's been this upliftment and empowerment directly at communities. So the handout is, they still need help, but the handouts have shifted towards they themselves growing themselves. How is that then shifted the mindset of that community?
So Ashraf, last week I took some young people from Slovo along with me. I was asked by the Greater Kailami Conservancy to facilitate a session on sustainable development and environmentalists feeling that they are really being sidelined, and how do you take power back. And I took a group of young people from this team that we work with at Slovo with me to Constitution Hill. Now, they were really just catching a ride with me. That was the intention. But when we got into the room in typical Barefoot Facilitator style, I decided I needed to rearrange the room to make it more conducive to the work I do and the way in which I facilitate. And Ashraf, these young people, without prompting, stepped up, agreed to deal with the registration table, did a fantastic job of managing registration in that room, participated in all of the activities. And on the way home, when I said to them, what were your biggest learnings today? I mean, we went to Play Africa, we went to a bit of the town hall conversation as well there. It was quite interesting to see how they have grown in their ability to get out of the community that they live in and hold their own and speak to lawyers and speak to senior environmentalists and feel pretty confident in themselves to be in that space. And for me, that was a super exciting revelation from them that, yes, they were afraid, but that a lot of the work we've been doing together, so they also helped me with a monthly play in the park, which again, the Barefoot Facilitator has kind of initiated with a lot of help where people have given. So Ashraf, in a lot of our homes, we take, toys, those of us who have young kids, take access to toys and early learning materials for granted, and often are irritated because we're tripping over just so many toys, not understanding that for many children, the notion of access to a toy to play with is an absolute privilege.
Yeah,
and so, many people have just kind of packed up toys that, still in good condition, that their children have outgrown, have dropped it off at my place. And once a month, we set up a play in the park at the Sir Drummond Chaplin Park across from where I run my home office. Now, these young people from Slovo have been assisting me to get that setup done. And, just simple skills like arriving on time, having a checklist for what needs to be set up, overseeing children younger than themselves. It's been a phenomenal learning for them. And they said, actually, we took everything we learned at Play in the Park and we kind of brought that to this Con Hill experience. And so, I think back to what you're asking, I think development is not just one thing, Ashraf. And developing a champion nation starts with developing champion human beings, champion families, champion communities. I think in the South African context, the assumption of what a family and a household looks like, and, the assumption of the parental support that those of us who come from, predominantly middle class environments assume that others have, the guidance we assume that they have. And so I think investing of our skills and privilege to grow other people to their potential is something that excites me, and very grateful to have the opportunity to do that.
And South Africa is, I think, greater for the fact that people like yourself do just that, right? Let's talk about how. So you talked about, just at the time of COVID. So we're talking about maybe 2-3 years, right? How has your investment of your skills and your networks and allowing them to get involved in this, right? How has that therefore shifted or transformed the Slovo Park community?
So, Ashraf, I need to say, when you go in there physically, it is the mess it's always been. I mean, you literally have to kind of walk. So, you asked whether I get to do the barefoot stuff. Very rarely in Slovo, except at Slovo Space, because you literally have to walk through sewer to access parts of the community. But what has happened is, firstly, the team identified toilets. So these are waterborne sewer toilets that had been vandalized and were completely unused by the community. Through a fund, the IUDF, the Integrated Urban Development Framework Fund, a grant through South African Cities Network was made available. And Ashraf, with a very modest amount of money. And I need to say that for 4 months, a couple of people earned a stipend, and this young group of young men, interestingly, repaired 10 toilets in that community. They costed themselves. They went out, bought the stuff. I mean, I obviously accompanied them on all of this, but their problem-solving abilities around the issues that face the community. And now they maintain those toilets. They charge people 2 rand a time. They clean them. They give them a piece of toilet roll when they walk in, and they have a regular presence at those toilets. They have turned that into a little entrepreneurship venture. But interestingly, of all the projects that we've done, it's the one where they have personally taken the most ownership. And there's something clearly about the dignity that has come to parts of that community, not the whole community, through. So these people got a stipend, but really gave of their labor power to turn those 10 toilets around. And then the CEO of South African Cities Network kind of visited to look at what they had done, and they had a little more funding. And they again identified running water and taps that needed to be repaired, and the fact that women really struggle when they do laundry in that community. And I mean, for those of us who've been having water cuts and so forth, we're thinking about, when do you run the washing machine? But women who really do the back-breaking work of washing laundry by hand. And they then decided to put up some wash troughs for the women. Slovo Space, Ashraf, this little space where we've put some artificial turf. So I need to say that the first round of artificial turf that we put in, it was stolen. It was very disheartening. And we kind of decided to try again. And this space has now become a meeting space for young people in the community. It's a little space that, could be in any high market area. And it's just lovely to see what that space has turned to in transforming the community, in having a physical space in their own environment that they can be proud of. And this weekend, together with Exotically Divine Pulse, they are now going to be planting a vertical garden in that space, and we'll see how that pans out. So a lot of learnings, Ashraf, about, persistence, the ability to accept that things don't always work the first time round, but also that people have ideas, people have agency, people have the ability to do things for themselves. You don't always have to wait for government to step in and do stuff. And that what they need is often just the opportunity to link with others. And I think for me, the joy has been just seeing people cross the divide to work in communities that historically they would not have access to. So somebody like Kalnisha Singh from KD Strategies, who is mentoring people in this community once a month on a Saturday, taking them to places they wouldn't normally get to, having conversations with them about how you create your own economic system. She's a development economist. There, I think you're now seeing the wash troughs that I talked about. So Ashraf, on the Barefoot Facilitator website, there's a historic transforming Slovo report, which kind of outlines some of the lessons we learned from doing this project. And then more recently, this year, we launched a poster series that kind of just tells the story of the evolution of this project. So it's still under the banner Transforming Slovo 2022. And we're very excited 4 months into 2023 that alhamdulillah, the project continues. It's not really a project. I think it's an ongoing labor of love with neighboring community.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think I've ever done an interview where I've spoken so little, because I'm just listening in awe of the type of connections that have taken place. And that's a tribute, in spite of your denials, to yourself and your ability to connect people to other people, or people to communities, which I think is formidable. And therefore we put you in the series called Champion Spotting. So thank you for doing just that. Just one other thing before I let you go. You mentioned the website, but do feel free to share some of the pictures and things, via Salam Media and myself, post this conversation, because I'd love to share that as well. And maybe just a last thought on this one very quickly. It still is an informal settlement, right? 30 years in. When does an informal settlement become a formal settlement with the perks that entails?
So Ashraf, I think we need to accept the reality in this country. I don't have the numbers of across the country, the number of people who live under informal circumstances, and the reality of people getting onto the housing waiting list. But I think what this project shows is that people don't identify housing as their biggest need there. I'm not condoning the circumstances that people live under, and obviously that needs to change. But I do believe that we have to accept that some of our compatriots are living under these circumstances. How do they continue to realize their potential, even when they live under those conditions?
Absolutely.
Ashraf, I think you were there the day we had the Secretary General of the Informal Settlements Network when we launched Digital Skills Hub, and it was pouring with rain. And he said, the fact that I live in poverty doesn't mean that I have poverty of ideas. And that has really stuck with me. There's a young lady in this group we work with, Tokelo Sedibe, top student at her secondary school. She has gone, I've linked her to, she wants to become a medical doctor. She's shadowed medical doctors in the community. She's gone to family members who are in the profession. She is a junior city councillor. So, how much do we understand of the potential of people whose life circumstances have brought them to live under those conditions?
Absolutely,
but champions, and are the champions, in fact, of tomorrow.
Well, there you are. No poverty of ideas, as you've mentioned. Appreciate your time. And yes, well, for us to become this champion nation, we need those champions of tomorrow to come to the fore, like ASAP. Absolutely. Rehana Moosajee, great talking to you. A real privilege, in fact, the Barefoot Facilitator. But look at the work that she's done at Slovo Park, or maybe, to correct myself, that she's inspired with others to get done at Slovo Park. I mentioned earlier on about the interview we spoke about infrastructure development in South Africa from the Muslim community. That interview was with Dr. Qureisha Suleiman. Listen to that. Just Google it. You'll find it a fascinating conversation indeed. Thank you so much. We'll talk about my first Ramadan, not mine, but Khadija Albertus right after this.